As you take your first breath this morning, a startling realization settles in. Nothing will ever be the same. The air feels heavier, as if the world itself is pressing down on your chest, and the familiar comfort of your bed is replaced by a strange electric tension. You blink, and the ceiling above you seems to pulse with a silent question, one that you've managed to ignore for years but can no longer escape. The room is unchanged, yet everything is different. The light filtering through the curtains is the same pale gold, but it illuminates a new kind of emptiness, a void that wasn't there yesterday, or perhaps was always there, waiting for you to notice. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every choice you've made, every path you've taken, has been guided not by desire for happiness, but by a quiet, relentless pull towards suffering. Not the dramatic, cinematic suffering of heroes and martyrs, but the subtle, insidious kind that seeps into your bones and colors every thought. Picture yourself standing at the edge of this new reality, the truth dawning on you all at once. You have chosen pain, again and again, even when you thought you were seeking joy. Why would anyone do such a thing? Why would you, with all your intelligence and self-awareness, repeatedly walk into the fire, knowing it will burn? Is it possible that suffering is not merely an accident, not just the price you pay for living, but something you have secretly, perhaps even willingly, embraced? The paradox is as unsettling as it is undeniable. You want to be happy, yet you find yourself drawn to the very things that hurt you most. You try to shake off the thought, but it lingers, persistent as a shadow. You remember the arguments you started, the opportunities you sabotaged, the relationships you let wither because the alternative peace, contentment, ease, felt somehow unbearable. You recall the moments when you could have chosen kindness to yourself or to others, but instead reached for the familiar sting of self-criticism, the cold comfort of regret. Why? What secret logic governs these choices? What hidden part of you finds meaning in pain? As you sit up, the question grows louder, echoing in the silence of the morning. You think of the man who chose to suffer, not a mythical figure, not a saint or a martyr, but someone ordinary, someone like you. Perhaps it is you, perhaps it is everyone. The man who, when faced with the fork in the road, again and again takes the path lined with thorns, not because he must, but because he cannot imagine another way. Is it possible that suffering is not the enemy, but the companion you have carried with you since childhood? That it is woven into your identity, as familiar as your own reflection? You remember the stories you were told, the lessons you learned, that life is hard, that nothing worth having comes without pain, that to suffer is to be noble, to be real, to be alive. You remember the way your parents spoke of their own struggles, the pride in their voices as they recounted the hardships they endured. You remember the way you learned to equate love with sacrifice, success with exhaustion, virtue with self-denial. But what if it's all a lie? What if the suffering you have chosen is not a badge of honor, but a cage? What if the pain you cling to is not proof of your strength, but evidence of your fear? The thought is almost too much to bear. It threatens to unravel everything you believe about yourself, about the world, about what it means to be human. You stand and walk to the window, searching for something. An answer, a sign, a way out. The street below is quiet, the world going about its business, oblivious to the storm raging inside you. You wonder how many others are living this same paradox, how many are trapped in the same invisible prison. You wonder if anyone ever truly escapes. Suddenly, you're faced with a moment that makes you question everything you thought you knew. If suffering is a choice, then so is freedom. But what does freedom look like when pain is all you've ever known? Can you trust yourself to choose differently? Or will you always return to the comfort of your own misery? Is it possible to unlearn the lessons of a lifetime? To rewrite the story you've been telling yourself since you first learned to speak? The questions multiply, each one more urgent than the last. What if happiness is not the absence of suffering, but the willingness to face it without flinching? What if the man who chose to suffer is not a fool, but a seeker? Someone searching for meaning in a world that offers only distraction? What if the pain you feel is not a punishment, but a message, a call to wake up and see the truth? You close your eyes and listen to the sound of your own breathing, the steady rhythm that has carried you through every joy and every sorrow. You realize that you are standing at the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath your feet. To step forward is to risk everything. to let go of the suffering that has defined you. But to stay where you are is to remain trapped, forever circling the same old wounds. As the sun rises higher, casting long shadows across the floor, you feel the weight of the great question pressing down on you. Why do you choose to suffer? What secret need does it fulfill? What would happen if you dared to choose something else? The paradox is complete. You are both the prisoner and the jailer, the wound and the healer, the man who suffers and the one who longs to be free. The answer is out there, waiting for you to find it. But first, you must be willing to ask the question, to face the darkness within yourself, to admit that you have been complicit in your own pain. And so you stand, trembling on the threshold of a new understanding. The world outside unchanged, but your inner landscape forever altered. The journey has begun, and there is no turning back. The man who chose to suffer is not a stranger, not a cautionary tale, but a mirror held up to your own soul. What will you see when you look inside? What truths will you uncover? What lies will you expose? The answers are not easy, and the path ahead is fraught with danger. But one thing is certain, nothing will ever be the same. As you take your first step into this new reality, the question lingers, haunting and unresolved. If suffering is a choice, then who are you, really, when you choose it? And who might you become if you finally let it go? The silence is deafening. The possibilities infinite. The story is just beginning. You find yourself standing in front of a mirror, the glass fogged by your own breath, your reflection blurred and shifting. You stare into your own eyes, searching for the origin of this strange compulsion, the urge to suffer, to seek out pain as if it were a lost friend. The question from the morning still echoes in your mind, but now it is joined by a deeper, more unsettling inquiry. Why does this hidden force exist? What ancient machinery within you turns the wheel of suffering, again and again, even when you long for peace? You remember the first time you felt it, a pang of guilt for a pleasure you didn't earn, a sense of unease when things were going too well. It was as if happiness itself was a crime, and suffering the only way to pay your debt to the world. You learned to wear your wounds like armor, to hide behind your scars, to believe that pain was proof of your existence. But where did this belief come from? Who planted the seed of suffering in your soul? You turn away from the mirror, the room suddenly colder, the shadows longer. You think of Carl Jung, who spoke of the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. Jung believed that suffering is not merely an external event, but an internal necessity, a confrontation with the darkness within. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. Is it possible that your suffering is a message from your own shadow, a call to face the parts of yourself you have tried so hard to ignore? You recall Friedrich Nietzsche, who saw suffering as the crucible of greatness, the forge in which the self is tempered and made strong. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering, he declared. Nietzsche's words ring in your ears, both a challenge and a warning. Have you mistaken the search for meaning with the pursuit of pain? Have you confused endurance with purpose, resilience with self-destruction? Arthur Schopenhauer's voice joins the chorus, whispering that suffering is the essence of life, the inescapable consequence of desire. To want is to lack is to suffer. The cycle is endless, a wheel that turns without mercy. You wonder if you are trapped in Schopenhauer's world, condemned to chase after fleeting pleasures, only to find disappointment and pain at every turn. Is suffering the price you pay for wanting anything at all? You think of Aldous Huxley, who saw society itself as a machine for manufacturing suffering, a system designed to keep you restless, dissatisfied, always yearning for something just out of reach. Huxley warned that the greatest danger is not pain, but numbness, the loss of the capacity to feel anything at all. Is your suffering a rebellion against this numbness, a desperate attempt to prove that you are still alive? Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism creeps in. The idea that you are condemned to be free, that every choice you make is a declaration of who you are. If you choose suffering, what does that say about you? Is it an act of self-definition, a way to assert your existence in a world that offers no guarantees? Or is it a form of bad faith, a refusal to accept the terrifying responsibility of freedom? Viktor Frankl's words offer a glimmer of hope. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Frankl survived the horrors of the concentration camps by finding meaning in suffering, by transforming pain into purpose. But you wonder, have you found meaning, or have you simply made a home in your own misery? Is your suffering a path to transcendence, or a prison of your own making? You begin to see the outlines of the hidden problem, the psychological and philosophical roots that bind you to your pain. It is not just a personal failing, not just a quirk of your own mind. It is a force as old as humanity, woven into the fabric of your being by evolution, culture, and history. The need to suffer is a survival mechanism, a way to signal distress, to elicit care from others, to prove your worth to yourself and the world. It is a story you have inherited, a script you perform without even realizing it. You think of the child you once were, learning to navigate a world that seemed indifferent, even hostile. You learned that pain brought attention, that suffering earned sympathy, that wounds were badges of honor. You learned to equate love with sacrifice, to believe that you must earn your place in the world through struggle and hardship. The lessons were subtle, but they shaped you all the same. You see it in the faces of those around you, the friend who cannot accept kindness without suspicion, the parent who measures their worth by the burdens they bear, the lover who pushes you away when things get too easy. You see it in the stories you tell, the myths you cherish, the heroes you admire. Suffering is everywhere, a silent currency that buys meaning, connection, identity. But beneath the surface, something darker lurks. The need to suffer is not just a response to the world, but a way to avoid it. Pain is familiar, predictable, even comforting. It shields you from the terror of the unknown, the chaos of possibility. If you are suffering, you do not have to risk hope, do not have to face the fear of disappointment, the agony of loss. Suffering becomes a shield, a way to hide from the vulnerability of joy. You realize that this hidden force is not just psychological but existential. It is the fear of freedom, the dread of responsibility, the anxiety of meaninglessness. To choose happiness is to risk everything, to step into the void without a map. Suffering is safe, even when it hurts. It gives you a script to follow, a role to play, a reason to exist. You feel the tension building, the sense that something vital is at stake. The roots of your suffering run deep, tangled in the soil of your mind and soul. To pull them up is to risk unraveling everything you know about yourself. But to leave them untouched is to remain trapped, forever circling the same old wounds. You ask yourself, what would it mean to let go of suffering? Who would you be without your pain? The questions are terrifying, but you cannot look away. The hidden problem is exposed, raw and undeniable. The man who chose to suffer is not a monster, not a fool, but a human being, fragile, searching, afraid. You sense that the consequences of this hidden force are even greater than you imagined. The roots of suffering reach into every corner of your life, shaping your choices, your relationships, your very sense of self. The next step is clear. Though the path is shrouded in darkness, you must confront the unseen consequences, the ways in which your suffering has shaped the world around you. The mirror waits, the reflection shifting, the truth just out of reach. The journey continues, the tension mounting, the stakes higher than ever. The man who chose to suffer is about to discover just how deep the rabbit hole goes. You step away from the mirror, but its image lingers in your mind, a ghostly afterimage, a question that refuses to fade. The air in the room feels charged, as if you've disturbed something ancient and powerful. You sense that the roots of suffering, once hidden, are now beginning to reveal their true reach. They twist through your life, silent and unseen, shaping everything you touch. You begin to notice the subtle ways in which your choice to suffer has rewritten the story of your existence, not just within you, but in the world around you. You walk through your day as if through a dream, every interaction tinged with a new awareness. The words you speak, the silences you keep, the glances you exchange, all of them bear the mark of your hidden allegiance to pain. You see it in the way you hesitate before accepting kindness, the way you brace yourself for disappointment, even in moments of joy. You realize that suffering is not just a private affair, but a contagion, spreading quietly from one person to another, infecting relationships, families, entire communities. You remember a conversation with a friend, the way you both danced around your vulnerabilities, each afraid to admit how much you were hurting. You recall the unspoken agreement to keep things light, to avoid the raw places where real connection might happen. You see now that your suffering was not just your own, it was a wall between you, a silent pact to keep the truth at bay. How many moments of intimacy have you lost to this invisible barrier? How many opportunities for love, for understanding, have slipped through your fingers because you could not bear to be seen without your armor of pain? You begin to notice the patterns, the ways in which suffering shapes your choices without your consent. You think of the jobs you didn't apply for, the risks you didn't take, the dreams you let wither because you believed, deep down, that you did not deserve more. You see how suffering has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, a lens through which you interpret every setback, every slight, every failure. It is as if you are living in a world designed to confirm your worst fears, a reality constructed from the raw material of your own pain. You recall the words of Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate who revealed the power of cognitive biases, the invisible forces that shape your perceptions and decisions. You realize that your mind is not a neutral observer, but an active participant in the creation of your suffering. Confirmation bias, negativity bias, the tendency to remember pain more vividly than pleasure, all of these conspire to keep you trapped in a cycle of self-reinforcing misery. You see how your brain, designed to protect you from danger, has become a prison warden, locking you inside a cell of your own making. You think of the neurological roots of suffering, the way your brain is wired to seek out threats, to remember pain, to anticipate loss. You recall the studies showing that negative experiences are processed more deeply, stored more securely than positive ones. You realize that your very biology conspires against your happiness, that the machinery of your mind is tuned to the frequency of suffering. It is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The trap is invisible, but the consequences are real. You see it in the culture around you, the way society rewards suffering and punishes joy. You notice how people compete to tell the most tragic stories, how pain becomes a currency, a way to earn respect and attention. You see how the media glorifies struggle, how heroes are defined by their wounds, how happiness is dismissed as naive or shallow. You realize that you have internalized these messages, that you have learned to distrust your own joy, to see it as fleeting, undeserved, even dangerous. You begin to understand the true cost of your allegiance to suffering. It is not just your own happiness that is at stake, but the happiness of everyone you touch. Your pain ripples outward, shaping the lives of your friends, your family, your community. You see how cycles of suffering are passed down from generation to generation, how children inherit the wounds of their parents, how entire cultures are built on the foundation of shared pain. You think of the stories you tell yourself, the narratives you cling to in order to make sense of your suffering. You realize that these stories are not just reflections of reality, but creators of it. The more you tell yourself that you are destined to suffer, the more you seek out situations that confirm this belief. The more you believe that happiness is impossible, the more you sabotage your own chances for joy. The trap is complete, the prison self-sustaining. You feel the urgency rising, a sense that something vital is slipping away. You realize that every day spent in the grip of suffering is a day lost, a day stolen from the life you could be living. You see how easy it is to let the days slip by, each one a repetition of the last, each one a missed opportunity to break free. You feel the weight of regret, the ache of wasted time, the longing for something more. You begin to see the outlines of a breakthrough, a way out of the trap, but the path is not yet clear. You sense that the answer lies not in denying your suffering, but in understanding it, in seeing it for what it truly is. You realize that you must confront the full extent of its power, the ways in which it has shaped your life and the lives of those around you. Only then can you hope to escape. You ask yourself, what would it take to break the cycle? What would it mean to choose something other than suffering? To risk joy? To embrace the possibility of happiness? The questions are terrifying, but they are also liberating. For the first time, you see that the prison is not impenetrable, that the walls are made of stories, beliefs, habits that can be changed. You feel the tension building, the sense that you are on the verge of a revelation. The unseen consequences of your suffering are laid bare, the cost of your choices impossible to ignore. The urgency is real, the need for change undeniable. You stand at the edge of a breakthrough, the possibility of freedom shimmering on the horizon. But the path is not easy. The forces that keep you trapped are powerful, deeply rooted in your mind, your body, your culture. To break free is to risk everything, to step into the unknown without a map. You sense that the next step will require courage, a willingness to challenge everything you thought you knew. The man who chose to suffer is not alone. His story is your story, the story of everyone who has ever struggled to break free from the invisible chains of pain. The journey is not over. The most difficult part is yet to come. You take a deep breath, the air sharp and cold. The world outside is unchanged, but you are not the same. You are awake now, aware of the trap, ready to fight for your freedom. The breakthrough is coming. The rebellion is about to begin. You stand at the threshold, the air thick with the scent of possibility and fear. The world you've known, built on the quiet, relentless logic of suffering, trembles beneath your feet. For the first time, you see the bars of your invisible prison, the patterns etched into your mind by years of habit, culture, and biology. The urge to turn back is strong, to retreat into the familiar ache of pain. But something deeper stirs within you, a spark of rebellion, a whisper that says, "It does not have to be this way." You remember the first time you questioned the script. Maybe it was a fleeting moment, a flash of clarity in the midst of despair. Perhaps you caught yourself laughing, truly laughing, and felt a pang of guilt, as if you were betraying some unspoken code. Or maybe you watched someone else, someone who seemed untouched by the need to suffer, move through the world with a kind of lightness you could barely comprehend. You wondered, what do they know that I don't? What secret have they discovered? The rebellion begins not with a shout, but with a question. What if everything you've been taught about suffering is wrong? What if the stories you inherited, the myths of noble pain, of virtue through sacrifice, are not laws of nature but choices repeated so often they became invisible? What if you could choose differently? You think of those who have broken free, the outliers and heretics who refuse to play by the old rules. You remember the words of Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the midst of unimaginable horror, who insisted that even in the darkest circumstances, you retain the freedom to choose your response. You recall the radical optimism of Nietzsche, who urged you to embrace life in all its chaos, to say yes to existence, not in spite of suffering, but because of it. You see now that rebellion is not the denial of pain, but the refusal to let it define you. You begin to experiment, tentatively at first. You notice the moment when suffering calls to you, the urge to criticize yourself, to expect disappointment, to brace for loss. Instead of obeying, you pause. You ask, is this true? Is this necessary? You realize that the voice of suffering is not the voice of truth, but the echo of old wounds, old fears. You learn to question it, to challenge its authority. You try something radical. You allow yourself to feel joy. Even if only for a moment, you savor a meal, a conversation, a quiet afternoon. You notice the resistance, the voice that says you don't deserve this, that it won't last. You let the voice speak, but you do not obey. You choose, again and again, to stay with the joy, to let it expand, to trust that it is real. You begin to rewrite your story. You remember the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." You realize that your past does not dictate your future, that your suffering is not your destiny. You are free to choose, to create, to become someone new. The rebellion is not a single act, but 1,000 small choices made every day in defiance of the old script. You look for allies, for those who have walked this path before you. You find them in unexpected places, in books, in art, in the quiet courage of friends who have learned to live without apology. You see that rebellion is contagious, that every act of freedom inspires others to question their own chains. You realize that you are not alone, that the desire for liberation is universal. You study the lives of those who have broken free. You think of Nelson Mandela, who emerged from decades of imprisonment with a heart unbroken, who chose forgiveness over bitterness, hope over despair. You remember Maya Angelou, who transformed her suffering into poetry, who refused to be defined by the wounds inflicted upon her. You see that rebellion is not the absence of pain, but the refusal to be ruled by it. You begin to notice the subtle shifts in your own life. You find yourself taking risks, reaching out, daring to hope. You notice that the world responds in kind, that doors open where before there were only walls. You realize that freedom is not a destination, but a practice, a way of being in the world, moment by moment, choice by choice. You confront the old beliefs, the stories that kept you trapped. You see that suffering is not a badge of honor, not proof of your worth. You realize that you do not have to earn your place in the world through pain. You are worthy simply because you exist. The rebellion is an act of self-love, a declaration that you will no longer betray yourself for the sake of an old inherited script. You begin to cultivate new habits, new ways of thinking. You practice gratitude, not as a denial of pain, but as an affirmation of life's complexity. You learn to forgive yourself, to let go of the need for perfection. You discover that joy is not a reward for suffering, but a birthright, available to you in every moment. You realize that the rebellion is not just personal, but collective. Every time you choose freedom over suffering, you create a ripple effect, a new possibility for those around you. You see that the world is hungry for this kind of courage, that your liberation is bound up with the liberation of others. You become a beacon, a reminder that another way is possible. You feel the old patterns begin to loosen, the grip of suffering weakening. You notice that you are less afraid, less guarded, more open to the beauty and pain of life. You realize that freedom is not the absence of suffering, but the willingness to meet it with compassion, to refuse to let it close your heart. You ask yourself, what would it mean to live as if you were already free? What would you do? Who would you become if you no longer believed in the necessity of suffering? The questions are exhilarating, terrifying, alive with possibility. You sense that the rebellion is not a battle to be won, but a journey to be lived. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, days when the old script feels irresistible. But you know now that you have a choice, that you are not powerless. The man who chose to suffer can choose again, can write a new story, can become the architect of his own liberation. You stand at the edge of a new reality, the world shimmering with potential. The rebellion has begun, and you are its leader, its first disciple, its living proof. The path ahead is uncertain, but you are no longer afraid. You have tasted freedom, and you will not go back. The final realization waits just beyond the horizon, a truth so powerful it will change everything. You feel its pull, the promise of a new way of being, a new understanding of what it means to be alive. The journey is not over. The most profound revelation is yet to come. You wake before dawn, the world outside still cloaked in darkness, the silence so complete it feels sacred. For a moment you lie still, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart. The rebellion of yesterday lingers in your body, a subtle lightness, a sense of space where once there was only the weight of suffering. You realize you are standing at the threshold of something vast and unknown, a truth that has been waiting for you all along. You rise and move through the quiet house, each step echoing with the memory of old fears, old patterns. But something is different now. The air feels charged, alive with possibility. You sense that the final answer is close, so close you can almost touch it. You feel the tension of the journey, the years spent circling the same questions, the pain of old wounds, the thrill of rebellion, gathering into a single luminous point. You stand at the window, watching as the first light of morning breaks over the horizon. The world is transformed, every leaf and blade of grass gilded with gold. You realize that you are seeing everything for the first time, as if a veil has been lifted from your eyes. The ultimate truth is not a secret to be discovered, but a reality to be remembered, a homecoming, a return to something you have always known. You close your eyes and let the light wash over you. In that moment, you understand. Suffering was never the enemy. It was never a punishment, never a test, never a debt to be repaid. Suffering was a teacher, a guide, a doorway into the deepest chambers of your own heart. Every wound, every heartbreak, every moment of despair was an invitation to wake up, to pay attention, to remember who you truly are. You see now that the man who chose to suffer was not a fool, not a victim, not a prisoner. He was a seeker, a pilgrim, a soul in search of meaning. His suffering was not a sign of weakness, but of courage. The courage to feel deeply, to refuse the numbness that so often passes for living. He was willing to risk pain for the sake of truth, to walk through the fire in search of something real. You realize that the ultimate truth is not the end of suffering, but the transformation of it. Pain does not disappear, it is transmuted, alchemized into wisdom, compassion, and love. The wounds you carry become the source of your greatest strength, the cracks through which the light enters. You are not defined by your suffering, but by what you do with it, how you hold it, how you share it, how you allow it to open your heart to the suffering of others. You remember the words of Rainer Maria Rilke, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." You see now that the journey was never about escaping pain, but about embracing the fullness of life, the joy and the sorrow, the hope and the despair, the ecstasy and the grief. To be alive is to be open, to say yes to everything, to let yourself be changed by what you encounter. You feel a profound sense of peace, a stillness that is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of acceptance. You realize that you are free, not because you have conquered suffering, but because you have made peace with it. You are no longer at war with yourself, no longer trapped in the endless cycle of resistance and regret. You are whole, complete, enough. You look back on the path you have traveled, the years of pain, the moments of clarity, the slow, patient work of rebellion. You see that every step was necessary, every detour essential. There are no wasted moments, no wrong turns. Everything belongs. The man who chose to suffer was always moving toward this moment, this realization, this homecoming. You open your eyes and see the world anew. The light is brighter, the colors more vivid, the air alive with possibility. You realize that you are not alone, that every person you meet is fighting their own battle, carrying their own wounds, searching for their own truth. You feel a surge of compassion, a desire to reach out, to share what you have learned. You understand now that the ultimate truth is not a solitary achievement, but a shared awakening. Your freedom is bound up with the freedom of others. Your healing is incomplete until you help others heal. The journey does not end with you, it begins again. In every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every choice to love in the face of pain. You feel the urge to speak, to tell your story, to bear witness to the truth you have discovered. You know that your words may not be enough, that the journey cannot be mapped for others, but you also know that every act of courage, every moment of honesty, every refusal to hide your wounds is a beacon, a light in the darkness, a signpost for those still searching. You stand at the edge of the world, the horizon ablaze with possibility. The final, most powerful realization settles in your bones. You are not the man who chose to suffer. You are the one who chose to awaken. You are the one who chose to love, to forgive, to begin again. You are the one who chose to live. The story is not over. It never will be. Every day is a new beginning, a new chance to choose. The ultimate truth is not a destination, but a way of being, a willingness to meet life as it is, to embrace the mystery, to trust that even in the darkest moments there is meaning, there is beauty, there is hope. You walk into the morning, the world unfolding before you. The past is not a chain, but a foundation. The future is not a threat, but a promise. You are free, not because you have escaped suffering, but because you have learned to hold it with tenderness, to let it teach you, to let it open your heart. As the sun rises, you feel the fullness of your own humanity, the joy and the sorrow, the strength and the vulnerability, the longing and the fulfillment. You are alive, awake, whole. The man who chose to suffer has become the man who chose to live. And as you step into the light, you know that nothing will ever be the same.